All right, so we're streaming live. There is a live chat. I'm trusting you to to be respectful, I suppose. Think of it as a classroom environment. Of course, I'd like you to have some fun in this, but you understand this is a high school. All right, so let's open up a new project. I'm going to go to create a nested loop project, and I'm going to show you how to do a two-player setup for a project. So I'm just going to open my previous project, the same project I've been teaching with, just called the McDowell Python course. You can create a new solution or you can add to a previous solution if you'd like. All right. So I'm going to create a new project to do, or a new file. To do that, I'm going to right click over here where it says PY and the name of the solution file. And I'm just going to click on add and go to new item. From here, I'm going to create a new item. I'm going to just call it two-player turns. All right. So for this particular project, we're going to make something called nested loops. I talked about this a little bit, but this will be a more explicit version of what I was talking about. Let's see, today is the 7th of October, or of November. There we go. So I'll put my initials and the date, and I'll also put the title of this. This is going to be nested loops, and it's a two-player turn-based game. All right, so the way that this is basically going to work, we're going to have two player turns that are separately going back and forth, and then there will be code that happens in between those two turns, or things that are executed inside those two different turns. So first I'm just going to make an infinite loop. I'm going to make a while true loop. And this is going to be basically the whole game. And you could make this, instead of making it while true, you could make a variable called game running or something like that, something to make it to where the game is running. And I'll set this to true. And now I can change this true statement to game running. Just in case we want to be able to quit the game, we can set something to turn the game running variable to false, and it'll quit out of this game. But really, we want this loop, this while loop, to happen constantly until we want to actually quit the game. You'll notice that we're indenting now. What we're going to have is we're going to create a player 1 turn, and we're going to create a player 2 turn. And they're going to just basically swap back and forth between each other with a flag. And a flag is what we just created right here with this game running flag. That is actually what is considered to be a flag. And a flag basically says you're going to stay in this loop until this flag changes. Right now the flag says true, and the game will be running forever inside this area until this flag, the game running variable, gets switched. And we're going to create one of those inside of this while loop. We're going to have two more while loops, and those are going to be our flags for us to know which turn is which, or which turn is happening at the current moment. So right now I'm going to make two while loops, and it's going to be while player 1 turn, while player 2 turn. What that's saying is it's checking to see, is player 1 turn true? If so, run this stuff. If it's false, it's going to go down to the next thing in code, and it's going to run this. And if that turns to be false, it's going to go back to check what's going to happen. Is while game running still running? Okay. Well, then we'll go back to player 1 turn. We have to create our flags here, so I'm going to just make them global constant variables. To do that, we can, or not constants, but global variables. So I'm going to set it to where when you first start the game, player 1 true equals true, but player 2 turn is going to equal false. And you could, of course, randomize this if you want. You could make it to where when the game begins, it pulls a random number and it decides who goes first based off of that random number. For now, we're just going to make it to where player 1 turn is the thing that it starts off with. All right, so that means that when it goes in here, it's going to say while this game is running. It checks to see if it's true, and it is. Then it goes down here and it checks to see is player 1 turn true, and it checks to see if it is, and it is. So it's going to make player 1 turn happen. I'm going to make this very simple, and I'm going to just see if this functionality works. To do that, I'm going to put input, just so that way it stops and it asks us something, or it mentions something. I'm just going to say player 1 turn. And then down below that, I'm going to, in the while player 2 turn, I'm going to make it change to that. So I'm going to just click on this number right here, the number of the code that I want. I'm going to copy this, and because I'm efficient, lazy, I'm going to just input it in here. There we go. Make sure that they're on the same amount of tabbing right here. So the characters should be right next to each other. All right. So what this should do is, if I run this, it's just going to stay in player 1 turn forever. And it's going to keep saying player 1 turn. In fact, I'm going to press F5 and run it just so you can see. It says it's going to run with errors. Okay. I am running the wrong code. My apologies. I have to choose what my start file is, and in this case I want to choose this 2-player turns right here. I'm going to right click on that and set it as my startup file. So when I run, it's going to run that. I was running the wrong code there. All right, so now it just says player 1 turn, as you can see here. And yes, he's back. Thank you. And as you can see, it says player 1 turn. And if I press enter, it's just going to keep saying player 1 turn, because there's nothing to turn the flag off for our while loop. So I'm going to close this, and I'm just going to change that while loop right now. In here where it says player 1 turn, I'm going to make it to where now, after you press something for this player 1 turn, and actually I'll insert a little line here with the /n to make it, put a little line in there. I'm going to make it just change player 1 turn will now equal false, and player 2 turn is going to equal true. So now it's basically just going to switch the turns. It's going to swap and make player 1 turn off or false, and turn player 2 turn on. And now when it quits out of this loop, it's gonna reach the bottom of this loop, and it's gonna check, is player 1 turn still true? But we turned it off right here, so it's no longer going to be true. So it's gonna go down to the next part of our code in this bigger while loop, the game running while loop. And it's gonna check, is player 2 turn true? And we turned it on right here, so it will be true. And then it's gonna say player 2 turn right here. All right. I'm going to take these 2 lines of code right here. I'm going to put them in after, right here. And I'm just going to swap these around to make it player 2 turn equals false and player 1 turn equals true. There we go. So now we have 2 different turns that run. This player's turn happens here. It has a flag to make it to where you can get out of the loop if you need to. And that flag is changed right here. And then when you're in player 2 turn, the same thing happens. It just swaps what the loops are. So let's try it out. I'm running the code. Now it says it's player 1 turn when I press anything, and now it says player 2 turn. And it's switching between the 2 turns. All right. So if you need to make a 2-player game, this is kind of the starting point for it. You have a while game running. If you want to make it to where you can exit the game, you just make something that affects this game running variable to be able to turn it off, and that will quit you out of the game. You now have the functionality to be able to change between 2 different turns using these nested while loops. These are called nested while loops because you have a while loop inside of a while loop. They're nested. Aw, that's cute. All right, so that's pretty much it for this short tutorial on how to make a 2-player game. This is just a starting point. Next, we're going to make it to where we can add some actual functionality. We're going to make it to where you can attack or heal yourself, and player 2 can also attack or heal themselves. And we'll implement a random number generator to determine how much you heal up and how much you attack by. And then we can start to implement ideas of, okay, if you have certain functionality, like maybe you've had multiple attacks in a row and it boosts your attack strength, or you can make it to where you could start implementing items to where if a player has a certain item, then its attack or heal is increased by a certain amount. There's a lot of things we can do with this. But first, we just need the setup here where we have 2 different turns. And you could have the player 2 turn be completely computer automated, all CPU decisions, or you can make it to where somebody else decides what they do. All right, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you later.